The fantasy playoffs are oh so close. It is week 14, so let's dive into some QBs, tiers, and rankings. Up in the S tier, we do have Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, and Jalen Hurts. Let's start with Jalen Hurts. He's been good, he's been useful, hasn't quite been the fantasy superstar that we have seen previously. Tom, since week 4, he has only rushed over 7 times once. Is that the reason why we're not getting those huge smash spots week in, week out?
Well, maybe, but let's be real. It kind of all comes down to a tush push for Jalen Hurts and the deep ball. The games where he goes up against offenses where he can really unleash the deep ball, the games where he can get into the end zone and get 2 easy touchdowns, that kind of just really helps his upside so much. And this week going up against the Chargers, I'm not sure that this is one of those games where I see it necessarily being a great week for him unless he gets the tush pushes, because the Chargers, they play the 4th most zone coverage. Now, Jalen Hurts, we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, he's been excellent on the deep ball, and against man coverage, he has the 2nd highest deep throw rate in the league at 20%. But when you play against zone defenses, that drops to a 12% rate. He ranks 16th in QBR against zone. He ranks 22nd in yards per attempt versus zone. And AJ Brown's splits against zone coverage are pretty poor as well. So I think there's enough reason why it's like, I could see Jalen Hurts not having a fantastic week this week, but it's so hard to bet against the tush push getting him a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, it just gives him that nice solid floor, even if it's not the blow-up week. You know, you're talking a low of probably 15, 16 points, aren't you, with before we even get anything added on top. Moving into the second tier, we do have Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, and Joe Burrow. We'll start with Matthew Stafford, the MVP frontrunner as we speak. He's been sneaky good for fantasy. You know, he's the QB6 overall at the moment, but it's been a little bit boom busty over the last few weeks. We've seen 26.9, 13.2, 22.9, and 13.6. So run of good week, bad week, good week. Is this the good week?
Yeah, it's been a little tricky to know exactly what you're going to get for the Rams, and to kind of expand on your point, he's been, over 25 points 5 times this year, but below 15 in 5. So, are we going to get the ceiling outcome, or are we going to get the more normal outcome? Now, going up against the Cardinals, the Rams are favored by 8. It's a 48-point over-under game, so you'd expect it to be relatively high scoring. But the Cardinals, they play the 4th most 2 high safety looks, and Matthew Stafford hasn't been incredible for yardage against those. He's thrown plenty of touchdowns. He's thrown 19 touchdowns against them to only 2 interceptions, but he ranks 22nd in yards per attempt. Puka Nacua tends not to do particularly well against 2 high safety looks. Like, he does fine against the average wide receiver, but not compared to his ceiling outcomes. They tend to come against single high defenses. So I think this is one where we see Matthew Stafford go out, probably score a couple of touchdowns, but I don't expect the yardage to be as high as we'd probably want in order for him to have a top 2 week kind of. But this feels fine. Just one other point to note that I found a little bit interesting about the Rams, they're 5-0 against AFC opponents this year. They have had a very kind of AFC heavy start to the season, but they're 4-3 against NFC teams, and it's NFC the rest of the way. You wonder if there's something about those teams that are a little bit more used to playing them. Guys like Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, they found little ways that they feel more comfortable taking those weapons and trying to slow them down a little bit. But ultimately, as long as Davante Adams is out there getting the goal line touchdowns, I'm not too worried about Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw this week, Davante Adams has broken the NFL record for touchdowns caught within the 10-yard line. So, yeah, there we go. A very niche, random touchdown stat. Also in this tier, we do have Joe Burrow coming up against an interesting Buffalo matchup. I think, we sort of think of the Buffalo defense being multiple, being slightly undersized, but being able to get around the field and be good. They've not really been that this year. I thought Joe Burrow looked good last week against the Ravens. I thought he was mobile. He got out of the pocket and, had impressive mobility considering his first week back from injury. So wheels up and Joe Burrow back into that kind of superstar status for fantasy.
Yeah, it was great to be able to see him get back and play how he did. It did take a little bit to get going. There were some errant throws. He had a 52% completion rate on a ridiculous 46 pass attempts. And I think it's kind of important to put those pass attempts into context when you view the stats from last week, because most teams aren't going to run 80 plays in a game every single week. Now, this game does have the second highest over under of the week. And Joe Burrow historically has played well against the Bills. He's had a passer rating of 105.7, 590 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2 games across both the regular season and the playoffs against the Bills. And this is essentially a playoff game for him. Like, he'll have T. Higgins back, we're expecting. The Bills, they are a top 4 pass defense in EPA allowed. They've allowed the second fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. But if Joe Burrow's going to go out there with his top 2 weapons, then I don't want to bet against him.
No, absolutely. Before we move into the B tier, though, if you are finding this for the first time, we are closing in on a nice little round number milestone of 5,000 subscribers. Come and get us one step closer. Hit that subscribe button. You will not regret it. In the third tier, we do have Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Patrick Mahomes. I know as a Ravens fan, Tom, this probably hurts, but Lamar Jackson hasn't cleared 8 fantasy points in his last 3 matchups, has cleared 20 fantasy points once since week 3. Appreciate he missed some weeks to injury. Do we just keep holding out hope that he's going to turn it around, or do we have to be realistic and say at the moment he's not healthy, he's not firing, and therefore we need to drop him significantly in our rankings?
Well, QB7 is a significant drop, really, for a player of Lamar Jackson's caliber. Those drops between 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and down as far as this at the top end matter so much more than the difference between QB15 and QB18, don't they? And it's right to start taking the approach that we have to drop him, because based on EPA per drive, last week was the worst offensive performance of the Ravens in any game they've ever had Lamar Jackson as the starter. He's played 103 games, and that was the worst. And it felt like the worst. It was miserable. And part of it was on Lamar, and part of it's been on Lamar for a few weeks. But what I would say, if the awful OPI call on Zay Flowers doesn't get called, that's a touchdown. If Isaiah Likely manages to hold onto the ball for another half a yard, that's a touchdown. There were all these little bits where it could have just come a little bit closer. Devontae Walker had the chance for a massive downfield play as well. So although Lamar scored fewer than 10 standard fantasy points for a third time in 3 games, it is concerning, but I think things set up well for him this week. This week he practiced on Wednesday for the first time in the last few weeks. The benefit of playing that Thursday game on Thanksgiving, it's given that little bit of extra time to recover. Pittsburgh, they play their 5th most single high coverage. Lamar Jackson's first in QBR versus single high coverage. He's thrown 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions this year, first in yards per attempt against it. He also has the 3rd highest deep throw rate against single high coverage. Pittsburgh, we know they like to blitz. He's struggled a little bit more with the blitz of late, but part of that seemed to be because he wasn't healthy. So I've got enough faith in Lamar that I didn't want to drop him too far past this. And I would expect this to be a game where they definitely try to get the run going. Mike Tomlin's talked about how they want to take away Derrick Henry from this game. But last week, the Steelers couldn't stop the run. The Bills ran all over them. And I expect that if they do that and it has to turn into a Lamar game, that he's going to be healthy enough to be able to get the ball going a bit better than it's been over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway from last week is, look, I appreciate it wasn't a good game. I don't think he played well at all, but that's the healthiest he's looked probably all season, really. I thought he looked agile. He looked more decisive. So hopefully, as you said, now he's had that nice long sort of mini bye week almost, he can get back to what we know Lamar can do. In our C tier, we do have Jacoby Brissett, Bo Nix, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, and Sam Darnold. The Jaguars, 8-4 on a 3-game win streak, top of the AFC South. Jacoby Myers seems to have finally unlocked this offense, and Trevor Lawrence has been pretty decent in the last 3 weeks. Do you think that finally having a receiver who's willing to go over the middle and make a catch over the middle, shall we say, has really unlocked Trevor Lawrence in this offense.
I do. And Jordan Rodriguez of NFL Daily was talking about this week about how much Liam Cohen wants to run those crossing routes, wants to run those routes across the middle of the field. And he hadn't really had that at all until recently with Jacoby Myers. And now, like, you kind of seeing the dividends from it. Like the Jags, well, just Trevor Lawrence, he's been better than he's getting credit for recently. He's rushed for 24 or more yards in 4 of the last 5 games. We know how much that helps fantasy, and he's also got 3 rushing touchdowns in those 5 games. You go back over the last 6 weeks, and he's averaging 18 PPR points. Like, he continues to finish in and around fringe QB1 territory, top 12. The Colts, they gave up 30 rushing yards to Patrick Mahomes 2 weeks ago, and I think that's somewhere where Trevor Lawrence is going to have a bit of success. I think that when you expand things and look back as far as the Jags bye week, Trevor Lawrence is number 4 in success rate among 34 quarterbacks at that point. Like, Trevor Lawrence has been playing well. It's just kind of going unnoticed a little bit because the ground game's more impressive. I mean, like, you look at this offense and the ground game is a top 5 unit in EPA right now, whilst the passing game has improved, but it's still, you're talking about a top 20 unit. You're not quite talking about a really good unit just yet.
Yeah, and then also in this tier, we've got Daniel Jones. I can't believe he was out there last week, to be honest. He was completely immobile. He's like a statue in the pocket. But that being said, I think as a pure pocket passer, that was the best game Daniel Jones has played this year. So, yes, the rushing has kind of buoyed his fantasy stats at points this year. We're obviously not expecting that at the moment. But if he can build off last week, I think he could be a still solid QB2 for your Superflex teams.
Yeah, I mean, he's been below 20 rushing yards in 5 of his last 6 games, and in part because of that, because he's not able to add a little bit with his legs. He's been outside the top 12 quarterbacks for 4 straight weeks. Now, what we had earlier on in the season, it was like, holy crap, is Daniel Jones the late round quarterback who's going to ruin everything? Now he's just kind of settling down into that fringe starter, streamable in good matchups, comfortable second quarterback in Superflex range. One area where I'm perhaps a little bit concerned for him this week is the Jags ranked 6th in blitz rate. Over the last 4 weeks, Daniel Jones ranks 32nd out of 44 quarterbacks to play in that period against the blitz. 0 touchdowns, 6.6 yards per attempt, which ranks 27th. But the Jags, I mean, they're not a defense that is completely locking down quarterback scoring. They've allowed the 4th most schedule adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. So, yeah, ultimately, this matchup could have been a bit more fun if Daniel Jones was healthy, but Vegas isn't too worried about it. Like, this game is, well, the Colts are favored by 1.5 and it's 47.5 over under. And that gives me enough confidence that if all the algorithms and models are expecting this to be good enough scoring, that we should be able to have faith and starting plenty of options in it.
You talk about Daniel Jones' injury. One player who is also injured, Justin Herbert, obviously broke the back of his hand last week, had surgery in the week to repair that, but sounding like still going to play through it, obviously on his non-throwing hand. Any concerns about that injury impacting him in what could be a nice matchup on Monday Night Football against the Eagles?
Yeah, well, the biggest impact beyond what it does to Justin Herbert is you need to be willing to take the risk if you're planning on starting Justin Herbert this week, because it is the Monday game, and obviously you're not going to be able to pick up Jalen Hurts. So your option will be, do I have to throw Trey Lance out there? Now, the Eagles, their defense hasn't been as good as it was last year, but I still think it's probably enough to give Trey Lance quite a torrid time, shall we say. I think it's just going to be a difficult game for Justin Herbert to really pay off in, when the way to get at the Eagles lately has been through the ground game. Like, they've given up the 14th most fantasy points to the running back position, but when you look at quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end, they're all bottom 8 rates. They allow the lowest red zone completion rate. They've kept 2 of the last 3 quarterbacks they've faced below a 70 QB rating, and they've given up 2 passing touchdowns in a game just once since week 5. Justin Herbert, like, the only kind of question for me, and something that I've gone back and forth about a little today, is, are we ranking him too high? Because since start of week 9, he's the QB 21.
Maybe. I just think that they're going to be pass heavy enough, because I think that we're not going to see big, deep downfield shots. And I do wonder if perhaps Justin Herbert can add a little bit in the rushing game, but it's nervousness, definitely. If you are agonizing over that flex or that super flex decision, though, you've got to start seeing question. Get them in the comments below. Tom and I will give you our thoughts, our opinion, and make sure you nail that lineup decision ready to win your week 14 matchup. In the D tier, we do have Caleb Williams, CJ Stroud, Marcus Mariota, and Tyrod Taylor. This Texans offense seems to be turning a corner. I think that they've finally adjusted the offensive line. It looks like they've found a, potentially franchise left tackle. And because of that, I thought CJ Stroud's second half particularly played really well last week. I thought he was a little bit rusty and forcing things in the first half, but it's given me some hope that this offense can get back to maybe rookie year CJ Stroud and really hit some dizzy heights.
Yeah, well, I mean, since the start of week 10, they ranked 15th in EPA per play, which is a bit of an upgrade because across the course of the season, they were sitting a little bit lower than that. And CJ Stroud hasn't really shown us anything since his rookie season. He's QB 25 in points per game, has scored over 15 points once since week 5. The only game where he's had 3 passing touchdowns was against the Ravens, who were without Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, and pretty much their entire pass rush, so he could do what he wanted. Last week was only the second time this year he's passed for more than 250 yards. And going up against the Chiefs, who themselves, their defense has taken a bit of a step back. Like, this is not the Chiefs defense that's taken them to Super Bowls in previous years. But at home in Kansas City, I still think they're probably going to be a little bit too tough for me to want to play Stroud. I mean, the way to get at the Chiefs is through play action. I mentioned it a few times over the last few weeks. The Chiefs allow by far the highest completion rate on play action this year. But CJ Stroud actually performs worse in play action than he does normally. Now, a lot of quarterbacks, you see a little bit of a bump when they're playing play action. His completion rate drops from 66% down to 59%. And with the Chiefs allowing the third fewest quarterback fantasy points per game, I'm struggling with it. And I'd probably, if anything, would be looking to drop CJ Stroud slightly further down in my rankings. I know you're a little bit higher than I am.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that I just really don't like this week at quarterback.
No, that's fair.
I think we've got 28 starters, obviously with the 4 bye weeks, but I'm probably comfortable with about 15 of those. I mean, you see here we've got our E tier of Tua, Tyler Shuck, JJ McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers. Normally we talk about the F tier being the guys that I'd be looking at a position player. I don't want to start any of these guys, even if it's Superflex League. I mean, we've got JJ McCarthy here. Looks like he's going to start back after the concussion. Do we feel confident he can get to 10 fantasy points?
So the biggest thing going for JJ McCarthy here is that maybe he has a little more confidence after seeing the way that Max Brosmer played last week. Like, that was easily one of the very worst quarterback performances I think I've ever seen. Like, the real special breed of just how bad that game was. And he gets to go up against the Commanders, whose defense ranks 32nd in pass EPA allowed. They also rank 22nd against the run. So it's like you can score on the Commanders however you'd like. They've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position, the 3rd most to a running back, the 10th most to wide receivers, and the 5th most to the tight end position. So if he was competent, this would be the kind of matchup which we'd be looking at and going, this is the matchup that's going to carry players into the fantasy playoffs. As it is, because JJ McCarthy has been so bad and so mistake prone, it's a little tricky. But over the last 6 weeks, the Commanders have allowed 5 quarterbacks over 17 points. They've allowed 4 of those 6 to go over 23 points. And it's been very rare that the Commanders have kept quarterbacks below 17 points. We've only kept 2 there all year. That was in week 1 and week 11. So, I mean, there's definitely a chance, but I'm not sure that I would want to put my playoff hopes on the line on JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll be honest, this week, outside of the C tier, I really don't feel comfortable starting any of these guys. So if you're looking for your QB2 in a Superflex, maybe it's a week to try and swing a trade, or maybe, as I say, look at a position player. Rounding it out in the F tier, we do have Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, Geno Smith, and Kirk Cousins. Shador Sanders named the starter yet again in Cleveland after what I thought was a really poor performance last week. Appreciate I've probably been a bit harsh on Shador Sanders. Tom, do you have any hope that he can put together a competent fantasy day?
I mean, not particularly. Like, over the last couple of weeks, yes, it's been nice to see him trying to push the ball downfield, and it's been nice to see a little bit more of the passing game. That, like, there are throws that Dylan Gabriel just wasn't making that we are seeing Shador Sanders at least attempt. Yes, he's staying in the pocket too long. Yes, he's bailing out backwards far too often still. But, like, at the same time, it's just like I just have a little more belief that guys like Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, Harold Fanning can just be slightly more competent because of what he's trying to do. Now, over those last two games, the Browns still ranked bottom 3 in EPA per play. Like, they're not doing anything particularly special with Shador back there. But this game against the Titans, I mean, the Titans are a terrible defense. Like, they've allowed the 6th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Their pass defense ranks 30th. So you'd like to think if he was going to show anything, it'd be here. But the over-under for this game is 33.5, which just tells you exactly kind of how miserable everybody expects this game to be. It's the only game with an over-under below 40 this week. And that just kind of screams, look, you've probably got better options elsewhere.
And that is it for this week. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up and that subscribe button on the way out. And make sure you check out these other videos we have released earlier this week.